growing weary of running from room to room, practicing one-tooth insurance-driven dentistry? Then stay tuned for the latest episode of The Lionhearted, where Dr. Stephen Rasner will hand you the blueprint for what many call the gold standard of general practice dentistry.
Hi everyone, Dr. Steve Rasner back with the Lionhearted podcast. Those of you that can't see me, that are just listening on your way to the gym or work, good. Because if you could, it's my birthday. It is the middle of July, Bastille Day. And I just played 2 hours of tennis. And if I don't get this podcast in the books right now, there'll be no podcast for tomorrow. And my manager might fire me, my manager being Beth. So here we go. I do look a bit disheveled. If you don't have a visual, I got a hat turned on backwards. And anyway, that's not why you tuned in. You tuned in to improve the quality of your practice, which I'm going to certainly try to help you do. As I always tell you, please reach out to me, like a lot of you do, at Dr. Rasner, that's Dr. Rasner at AOL.com. So this is what I want to start with today. And by the way, you can find my courses at the Rasner, Rasner Institute.com. And courses we have left for this year are October 4th and 5th. My live, hands-on, atraumatic surgical extractions and site development. That's you coming to my office, working on live patients, as long as you have a license in your state and malpractice. So pretty cool situation I've had for several years. In fact, just got renewed, so I'm pretty excited. Our 2020 dates are also listed at RasnerInstitute.com. And as I said in the last podcast, I intend to take the show on the road, which I've done for years, but my own Rasner Institute show on the road, maybe pairing me with other speakers I think could have impact you. So let me tell you what today's going to be about. Today is about one of my podcast listeners who wrote to me, and the reason I'm going to talk about what I wrote back to him, because what he wrote, I think you other younger dentists need to hear. And because you're not alone in this, man. You are not alone. This is a hard challenge, difficult challenge for some of you. And I want to tell you what I wrote to him, because it's just so authentic. It's so real and I think it's so the right way to help you guys who might be in the same boat. And what he said to me is that he recently bought a practice and that it's been really rough, to say the least. And he said sometimes hearing things that I have to say, or perhaps other podcasts, are the only things that keep him from feeling like a complete failure. He told me that he's taken action to right the ship, but he's still in a very close paycheck-to-paycheck situation. And, this is a doc, a fellow colleague of yours, that in my opinion is doing all the right stuff. He went out and he got his IV sedation license, which, wait for my response to that. He's training with people that I recommend, like Mike Picos, John Coys, Frank Spear. But his biggest issue is that he's spending a lot of money on marketing and he's not getting any new patients. So, man, I think that's spot on to many of the people that tune into me. So I want to tell you what I told my friend to do. And the first thing I'll tell you is this. Even if you have an IV sedation license, first of all, if you do, I believe that automatically qualifies you, of course, for the oral sedation protocol that I employ. I would tell you that you can't really market as effectively IV sedation as you can oral sedation. And I have specific reasons I believe that. Now listen, I'm not here to offend any of you who've taken the time to take the difficult training to get an IV sedation license. I think it's amazing what you've done. All I'm telling you is that you can't market that with the same return as you can oral sedation. And here's why. A number of people, quite frankly, are still afraid of being IV sedated. Some of them are afraid, believe it or not, of just the needle that you're going to put in their arm. And secondly, there's a large segment of patients that are afraid of what might happen during their IV sedation experience with you. And even if that is a perceived erroneous thought in a lot of patients' heads, it doesn't matter. What matters is perception. So the beautiful thing about your permit, your IV sedation permit, is that you can utilize that when you have to, because oral sedation does not work 100% of the time. It works an extraordinary amount of the time, but not 100%. And that's an important point for me to make, because of all the podcasts that I do that are downloaded the most, the ones that I see that get the biggest response are my podcast on oral sedation and my podcast on comprehensive treatment planning. And I'm going to tell you something. You already know that I'm a big advocate of the big four. The big four are training in oral sedation, then training in atraumatic extractions, then training in site development, which takes quite a bit of time because that's bone grafting, developing the sites that you take teeth out of to receive implants. And the fourth one, of course, is if you're going to do all that, I don't know why you wouldn't just make a lifetime commitment to surgical and prosthetic implants. I got to tell you, a lot of you are listening. And those of you that are a couple years down the road right now, that listened to me a couple years ago, there's many of you experiencing the benefits and the positive returns of such a journey that I'm advocating for you. And keep it in mind, I'm not telling you not to train in occlusion. I'm not telling you not to train, of course, in restorative materials and all the things you need to know today. I'm simply telling you those four have to be the fundamental core with my blueprint to get you to the fastest place that'll make you really enjoy this profession the way it still can be enjoyed. You don't have to. I'm going to tell you something. There's a lot of guys struggling. And it is harder for you than it was for me and a lot of my colleagues, because we didn't come out of school $250,000 or more in debt like you are. And there wasn't the advent of corporate dentistry or toxic reimbursement by so many insurance companies. We didn't have that. So you do have a tougher road than I had. But you absolutely can beat this system ethically, morally, and have a great name and a great reputation. Those of you that are willing to try my blueprint, which is the four things I just told you. So getting back to my colleague. So what I wrote to him is I told him that I would market right away, and I'll tell you guys in a minute how to market, like what avenues to market, the oral sedation. I would promote no-cost oral sedation. Listen, man, the pills cost $8. The combination I recommend of triazolam, of Benadryl, of Atarax cost $8. And those of you that haven't tuned in for the first time, go back to my podcast. There's several now on oral sedation. Or ask Beth to send you the stuff, because that means you're going to get my oral sedation protocol. You can't just start giving pills out there. You know that. You got to get the permit required in your state or your country. And it's a moderate sedation level permit that you're trying to get. We're giving a combination of multiple drugs, in my case, Atarax, Benadryl, triazolam, along with nitrous. Now, naturally, the nitrous oxide bill you have per month is not $8. But here's the thing, and I'm really committed to this. The type of cases that you're going to attract because you know this and you are promoting this sedation far outweigh the negative of charging for it. I know it's controversial. Listen, it's the way I've gone for 22 years, and I don't regret it for 1 second. I never get a gas bill per month that's, I don't know, $900 and say, oh, that wasn't worth it. Because it's an interesting concept, honestly. If I think about it, the concept is this: you're going to attract patients. You're going to attract patients that are going to pay you. First of all, they have a lot of required care. Just to put out their fires is a lot of care. Not even to give them the ultimate restorative implant case. I mean, just to treat the pathology that they are loaded with, because they have been so afraid for so many years. And I know I never get tired of telling you, and maybe you get tired of hearing it, but it just doesn't ever end. The number of people and I'm only in my own community, obviously. I don't have offices in multiple states. I have 2 offices, and they're 15 miles apart. And it just never ceases to amaze me. The people that just keep coming in, whether they're 78, 80 years old or 18. And it's not an effective protocol for 100%, but it is effective for such a high percentage. I don't really know the science of I didn't stop to do the research. It's well above 95%, I can tell you that, of patients that come into me that this is effective for. It's an unusual thing that I do an interview, and I did do one 3 weeks ago where I didn't think the patient was appropriate, and I wasn't even willing to try. But I consider that a gift. I do. I consider it, oh my God, thank God I didn't try to do this. And the reason I'm telling you all this is when you're doing the kind of cases that are going to be thrown to you. In other words, patients coming to you because they heard you do sedation. And it's going to happen. I'm telling you, it's not in 6 weeks. But if you put together what I gave this young man that I'm going to give you in this podcast, in a matter of months, I don't know how high it'll get, but in a matter of 3 months, 6 months, certainly a year, you are going to find people calling your office, asking for you and asking to come in because they heard about your sedation. And that you basically, and if that's because you do it for free, I find it stunning that a patient will pay $15,000 plus for the work they need, but find it impressive that the sedation's for free. I don't care how they come in. I am telling you, it works. Okay. So my first piece of advice to our colleague was get in there and do no-cost oral sedation advertising. And the way for him to do that, my advice, was through hard media. Now, when I say hard media, I mean print media. And this is what I mean by that. No matter what town you live in, Chicago, LA, a rural town, I'm really not looking for you to advertise at all in major newspapers. Like, I'm in the Philadelphia area. So I wouldn't advertise in the Philadelphia Inquirer or the Philadelphia Daily News. Why? Because the return on investment's not nearly enough. And I have found, from 20 plus years of doing what I'm telling you to do, I go for the free periodicals. So get somebody in your office. I don't care if you have an office of 3 or an office of 30. Have somebody dedicate extra time immediately come Monday to researching free periodicals that patients can pick up at the convenience store or the major grocery store. Some of the upper level grocery stores, you have to pay to get on the racks that are in that store. But you'll have to do that research to find out. So That's the one. And then you want to pay for at least a half a page ad because you can afford to do that in those periodicals. You don't want to put in a little ad that they have to fight to find. You can afford to do that. Now, what do I pay for that? I think I'm paying usually under $600 per month, and they're usually out twice a month. And there's various periodicals. You need to do the research on what's popular in your town. Okay, that's what I mean when I say hard media. Now, I have to add one more disclosure. In my area, so I'm about an hour from a major city. So, think about where you're at and think of the comparison. So I'm about 45 minutes to 1 hour from Philadelphia. And in my area, the local major newspaper, I can afford to be in that as well. And that does cost me, I'm giving you these fees on purpose. It costs me, I have had different programs over the years. Right now I'm in one. Usually they're going to want you to sign up for a 12-week, a 3-month period. Right now, and you can be very strong with your negotiations these days because periodicals, hard newspapers are struggling. So this paper used to cost me like $3,600 a month, whatever, with the deal I cut. The most recent, I'm sharing this in case you can cut the same deal. The most recent deal I've cut, I'm in there, I believe, twice a week, and I pay, it's ridiculously cheap. $200 a week, I believe it is. So it's about $800 a month. And I only limit it, and I would suggest you broker this. Go for 2 months. If you can get 8 weeks to see if it works for you versus 12 weeks, that's the deal you want. And you couldn't even begin to cut those deals 10 years ago. Today you can. If you want any more info on that, I know you're listening right now on the way to work. Maybe you can't jot it down. Just write to me, Dr. Rasner at AOL. Could you review or send me some of the information you were talking about regarding your ads and what you spend? Now, second thing is the radio show. So I'm on radio, and this is a sweet deal. Again, I don't want you to look for the major radio show. I've done that. I've spent $22,000 for 6 weeks on ESPN. That's very hard to recoup a return on. And I got 2 patients or 1 patient out of it. It's ridiculous. I found a local rural oldie station, which I think is a wheelhouse for you to look for. Because people that listen to oldies, I'm talking 60s, 70s, 80s, are a good marketing group for most dentists. And I will tell you, without a doubt, it's the best patient I get. And I cut a deal with a local radio show, and I'm giving again this to you. So what happens is they come in literally with a tape recorder, like I'm doing right now. It's not a tape recorder, into my office, and I cut a 60-second commercial. And I sent this gentleman, and I'll send it to you, a copy of it. If you write to me and say, to get an idea of what I'm saying. And, you should know what I talk about besides sedation is I talk about trust and confidence in finding a dentist that you can trust and a dentist that you're confident in. And that's always my message. And you don't have to tear anybody else down, by the way, to deliver that message. And it's a sweet deal. It's 5 times a day, 10 minutes to the hour. I think it's from 8 in the morning and then 10 at 9. I always like it the same time. If you can cut that deal, do that. 10 of 8, 10 of 9, 10 of 10, 10 of 11. And I think I'm on at the witching hour, at the driving hour, at 10 of 6 when people are going home. And that costs me $900 a month. So there's a basis for you. $900 a month for that. And I'm out there, and what I would do is, what you should really do is, it's more work for me, but just write to me, and I'll have Beth or myself send you a copy of one of those ads, or 2 of them. I change them every 3 months, and they work. So remember all the stuff I'm telling you right now. This is not random stuff. This is literally the wheelhouse of what's worked for me. Listen, right now, I'm in the middle of figuring out whether a $35,000 investment worked for me. I don't want to deliver the name of the product yet because in no way do I want to. I want to give the company that's in the middle of this with me absolutely the time to make sure that it works or doesn't work. And in private, I would tell you that, meaning through a email. But I try a lot of stuff, and I'm in the middle of. There's a major magazine company that makes magazines custom made for offices. There's probably several that do it. And I'm about in the third month, and I'm not sure if it's worth it. I'm in the middle of deciding that right now. It's certainly not making my phone blow up, which is why I talk to you about the things I talk about. I want your phone to blow up. If you have, like my colleague has, these great skills. I mean, this gentleman that wrote to me has an IV sedation permit. I just don't think he's marketing the right thing. And maybe he's not marketing to the right group. And by the way, if you're in Europe or some other part of the world, same principles apply to me. You want to get the message out. You want to get the message out that you do sedation. There's two messages that I always try to deliver on. That you do sedation dentistry. And the second message is that they can trust you and be confident of your work. And that's a wonderful thing, a wonderful message to get out there. I mean, think for a minute of all the alternative messages. Do you want to be the guy that's people come to you because you're convenient, because you're opened every night? I don't think that's a thing to shoot for after all the work and sacrifice you've done. I mean, you have to do that in the beginning. In the beginning of your career, yes, you have to open up whenever you have to open up for those first 5 years to get that message out there to people. And you need to apologize to no one. You're doing it for you, for your family, for your kids, for your wife, your husband. You have to let people know that you exist, and whatever that takes. Do you want to be known in your community because you deliver $600 dentures? I mean, I guess that works for some of us. That wouldn't work for me. It's not why I'm in this. It's not why I signed up. I try to give the best product, whatever the time it takes me, not the fastest it takes me. That's my blueprint. And it works, by the way. I wish you guys, knock on wood, I've been on this podcast for almost a year. And there's been times during this year when I've had crappy weeks and crappy months. Not many, by the way. But we are killing it in the last 2 months. And it is all because of everything I've shared with you on these podcasts. There is no secret. It is because of the skills I've harnessed, and starting with the skill of oral sedation. I'm not kidding you, which isn't even a skill, as I've said many times. It's not a skill, it's a permit, because the pills do the work. It's a skill by keeping your patients safe. Proper patient selection. Okay, I guess that's a skill. There's many other skills that take a lot longer to achieve high status than that one. Anyway, I told you in the last time I did this podcast, I'm going to try to keep them to 20 or so minutes and deliver, I hope, a lot of bang for your buck. What I'm going to do on next week's podcast is I'm going to talk to you about how you need to talk to the terminal dentition patient or the partial dentition patient. Like, what is the best way for the patient that's sitting in your chair and not wearing a denture or not wearing a partial, and that is where they are going, or even an implant retained partial or denture. What's the best way to communicate that world that they don't know about yet? They may know it from their friends or their parents, but they personally don't know it. And you better be sure you need a really clear way, and I have one for you. So everybody, I hope this worked for you. Tune in to write to me, Rasner, Dr. Rasner at AOL, at therasnerinstitute.com, and hope to meet some of you in person soon. Thanks for tuning in. See you then.